Hello everyone. Um, Here is Kasatmia, and I collaborated with Rock University recently, and we together worked together to form a Worlds recap um, piece. So what I mean by that is we went over the TCG and VGC areas where I have 15 and 10 years of expertise respectively. And we looked at the World Championships, some of the key storylines, some of the key meta developments, how to read a metagame, and what happened at the World Championships this year. We did a live session of this that lasted about an hour, about a week ago today, and so we just want to make a virtual version of that so that people who missed the original session can come and get all the same content in a different delivery method. So we're going to be going over the 2025 Pokemon World Championships in Anaheim, and a couple of key checkpoints. We're going to talk about juniors and seniors accomplishments respectively, go over the TCG finals in detail, as for I personally think that it is one of the most impactful games in modern Pokemon history. Oh my goodness, my voice. And then we're going to go over the VGC Masters meta and finals, and then TCG, the meta, the predictions, and the finals as well. So let's start off in juniors and seniors for baseline storylines. Some of these players, of course, there weren't as many storylines, rather it was just a really cool accomplishment for them that we want to bring to light, because if we're going over the other divisions, it's only fair to mention the juniors and seniors. In VGC Juniors, we had Luke Whittier taking the championships with Ice Rider, Calyrex, and Miraidon for their core, using a Trick Room core with the Ice Rider and Farigiraf, setting Trick Room, or the Urshifu to kind of control those tempo-based strategies that juniors can sometimes fall into, a Landorus just to pierce through everything, and a very bulky foundation to their team to be able to outlast, outdamage, and really just take control over their own games. There's Kevin Hahn, also on Ice Rider and Miraidon, but with a few different changes to his team that I would like to get into a bit more detail in just a minute. We have Yuka Okita for our TCG Juniors winner, playing Raging Bull Ogerpon, a very reliable deck that can do a lot of damage consistently, so pretty cool. And then there was the Seniors Finals, which we will get into later with Fuquan Liao and Gabriel Fernandez. So going over to Kevin Hahn, he is our second ever two-time World Championships winner, winning Juniors 2024 and Seniors 2025. Previously to this year, the only person who has won multiple World Championships was back in 2011 to 2013, with Ray Rizzo winning 3 World Championships in a row, 1 in Seniors and 2 in Masters. So it's a crazy cool accomplishment that someone was able to match. And yeah, we wanted to bring a little bit of attention to that. He specializes in balanced teams, Kevin Hahn does, and he focuses on having a balance of pressure and utility across the entire team. In his first juniors stint, he was using Ice Rider Calyrex just to support a more Trick Room mode with a balanced team of bulk through the Raging Bolt and Rillaboom, Farigiraf for an alternate Trick Room setter, and Urshifu and Incineroar to take control over the game state and to prevent defensive plays whilst also dampening the opponent's very high power physical options that were popular for the metagame at the time. In this year, very similar approach, but just going with a bit more of a brute force strategy. Only one Trick Room setter, but being able to spec out into more defenses across the board and being able to run more proper damage calcs and know what to expect. It's easier to try and metagame around when everyone is using the same set IVs and trying to play standard teams for the World Championships and teams that are known to be doing well overall. In addition, for this year, he had utility across the team, Snarl on Miraidon to lower special attack paired with Incineroar lowering physical to make a bulky backbone, Trick Room on the Calyrex in order to gain some speed control, a Flare Blitz Incineroar, move that's only sometimes run but offers a massive damage option from there, and Pollen Puff on Amoonguss instead of going for the 4 support moves just to give it the ability to do some chip as well. And yeah, we're really curious to see what Kevin Hahn does in the future, especially as he's someone with a very, very limited and coveted title now as a second ever 2-time World Championship winner for the video game. So, moving on, we have Seniors TCG Finals. And I'm going to try and go over this one a little bit quicker because as I took a very long time going very in-depth in our previous analysis for this set, and as much as I would love to, there's other people who can do it better than I can. So, on Seniors TCG Finals, it's a war between two different massive storylines. Either Gabriel Fernandez, the King of Seniors, who won 4 regionals in 2025, 3 internationals, all 3 internationals, I should clarify. He has quite literally had a perfect season. He has maxed out championship points, he has won almost every single event that he has gone to, and it has led him to be quite literally one event away from having a perfect season, the World Championships. He has achieved the max championship points possible in a season, and from his Worlds finish so far, he's in at least second because he's in finals. He is one best of 3 set away from becoming the only player to ever have a perfect season in the trading card game or video game. No one has ever won every single event before. This would be revolutionary, and it's from a player who's won the World Championships before, back in 2023. It is plausible that Gabriel Fernandez can win this event, rocking his Zoroark core. Then, on the other side, we have Fuguan now. He's the dark horse for the tournament, and why do I say that? He's the first Chinese player to make a finals at the World Championships. That is very important, because the Chinese scene has only existed for 2 years. They have only started printing cards in the simplified Chinese language, I want to say, 2, maybe 3 years ago at this point. But they play a completely different format to the rest of the world since they're trying to catch up on sets still. So he is going to the World Championships with an archetype that he hasn't really tested against other people from his area. So he would have had to do a lot of hotel testing and trying to prepare for the event without having qualified with that same metagame around him. So a massive step back from preparedness, but he's made it all the way to the finals of the World Championships. Can he go any further? He's rocking Goldingo Joltik, a deck that aims to draw cards very fast and set up very strong and wide boards that are able to abuse prize card mechanics through Iron Hands, which can take an extra prize when it knocks things out, or Pikachu, which has an ability that lets it stay alive after it's hit for lethal damage if it's the first attack it's taken. And so Goldingo has the draw power. The Zoroark deck that Gabriel Fernandez has is also focused on draw power through discard draw 2 effects through its abilities. Let's see what deck with the draws can do more. Game 1. Prizing wise, Fuguan didn't really prize anything. Gabriel Fernandez has one crucial prize card that we're going to revisit at the end of the game, being the Blood Moon Nurse Luna on top. Most players take their prizes from the bottom up, which means that Blood Moon Nurse Luna is likely going to be prized for the entirety of the game. Let's see on if that affects anything. So, going into the game, the main strategy that Gabriel Fernandez is using is just to set up a Pokemon with the Dark Energies, have a Reshiram on the bench, and hit constant poke with 170 damage, have Pesharunt for big burst damage, and being able to draw a lot of control pieces to kind of control Fuguan's tempo of play. There's also another card that I'll bring up on our next game, which is much more relevant because he wasn't able to set it up for this game. On Fuguan's side, however, he's focused on using this Pikachu EX. Even though he has Goldingo, which has a very high burst damage attack, and Iron Hands, which is able to cheat out extra prize cards, Pikachu is the star for this matchup. With 200 HP, sometimes 250 with a Bravery Charm, he can use Topaz Bolt, discarding 3 energy from it to 300 damage for 1 Grass, 1 Lightning, and 1 Metal Energy. That one-shots Zoroark EXs. The ability Resolute Heart means that he can't be one-shot in return, and he's able to charge all of this using a Joltik, which can attach 4 energy from deck to the Pikachu. So if you set up a Pikachu, Gabriel is going to have to try to deal with it over 2 swings. Fuguan loads it up for 2 swings. It means that Fuguan can take 4 prize cards as Gabriel only takes 2. And the player with no prizes at the end of the game is the one who wins. So that favors Fuguan significantly in the long run. On the last turn of the game, Gabriel was managed to claw back a little bit of a board advantage for himself through a couple of very intelligent attacks, used some control effects, and Fuguan was left with a pretty wide hand, and all he needs is a gusting effect and a superior energy retrieval to win the game, using Goldingo's attack, Make It Rain, 50 times the amount of energy you discard from hand, On the bench on Gabriel's side, Pressure Run 190 HP, that would be enough for it to be knocked out, Superior Energy Retrieval putting 4 basic energy back to hand. So all Fuguan has to do is find his pieces. He uses Arven. Arven means that he cannot use Boss's Orders in order to bring something up anymore, which you would think removes one of his outs from his Goldango draws. However, he chooses Air Balloon and Prime Catcher. Prime Catcher is an item that brings in one of the opponent's bench Pokemon and lets you switch your active Pokemon. And this is a very important card for statistics management for Fuguan. It allows him to, instead of drawing one card with Goldango's coin bonus ability, he lets him move it to the active spot and draw 2 cards instead. It gives him, I believe it was an additional 15% chance to hit one of his Superior Energy Retrievals as an out instead of the 1 card which has to hit either a Boss's Orders or a Superior Energy Retrieval. It is more statistically favorable if he uses the Arven first, removes the Boss's Orders as an out, and gets 2 cards to fund a Superior Energy Retrieval with the size of deck. A very intelligent play that I'm going to be very honest with you, not a lot of people thought about in the moment, but it is absolutely awesome to see. There might be one thing that you notice with the shuffle going on. Fuguan's deck is in blue, Gabriel's giving it a cut just to make sure that everything is in proper order for like statistics and just to make sure that he's sure it's sufficiently randomized, but you might see that there is a card flipped over. That card that is flipped over is a Superior Energy Retrieval. It is complete coincidence, I am sure, but Gabriel Fernandez is a player who has been criticized for some suspect deck choices and wins in the past. As much as I'd like to not talk about it, it is a pretty important thing to bring up in the context of the World Championships match, because it is likely something that's going to follow Gabriel for a while. Most people can admit that it looks like a mistake where a card just got caught on one of his fingers while he was shuffling. Neither player noticed until the deck returned to Fuguan. Fuguan gave it a final cut, and then Fuguan drew cards. In the end, Fuguan ended up drawing the card needed, the Superior Energy Retrieval, off the top 2. Because of that, the judges ruled that there was no penalties associated for Gabriel to win the game, and Fuguan said that, hey, if I don't get the Superior, Gabriel has it, I'll concede the game. Fuguan gets it, he wins game 1. That sets a massive set of momentum in Fuguan's priority for the remainder of the game. I just want to quickly highlight, this is the stage for the tournament. Kind of awesome. I just had no better place to slot this in. Let's talk about game 2, and you already see that there's a Toedscruel in there. Game 2, he evolves into Toedscruel. Toedscruel has an ability called Mycelium Might. It prevents the opponent from putting cards back into their hand with the effects of items, and that means Superior Energy Retrieval doesn't work anymore, which means that if Gabriel Fernandez can keep using attacks to get rid of Fuguan's Pikachus, then he'll have nothing he can do. Gabriel doesn't bench anything that Iron Hands can abuse, and he starts taking knockouts against the Iron Hands and against the Pikachus. Fuguan just has nothing he can do. He concedes, we go to game 3. And with that, Fuguan has priority once again. He sets up a Pikachu once again. Gabriel sets up some pretty alright board states, but all things considered, Fuguan starts just a little bit more ahead with his Joltik. Gabriel has one very slow turn in the early part of the game, where he just attaches and passes. Fuguan, with his final Boss's Orders, is able to close out the game, knocking out one of the opponent's bench 2 prized Pokemon as Gabriel tries to stall with a Zorua. And that leads to Fuguan being your world champion for the senior division. The first Chinese world champion in just 2 years of the game, and preventing the perfect season. Who knows where these players are going to go next, but it's one of the most impressive storylines of the tournament. Carrying on to a meta breakdown for the video game side now. I know I'm pivoting back and forth between VGC and TCG, but unfortunately, there's a lot of interesting things that happen in both sides. Let's talk about VG a little bit. NAIC metagame first, Incineroar, number 1 Pokemon. After that, we have a whole lot of different restricted Pokemon, but the primary theme is that they are mostly either special attackers, Pokemon that run Swords Dance in order to buff themselves up, or Zamazenta, which has the ability to use Body Press, ignoring attack drops, and doing big damage anyways. Then it's a lot of supportive Pokemon or more utility-focused Pokemon that try to take priority in the game. Why? Well, that's because Incineroar is 50% usage. Intimidate decreases the attack stat of both of the opponents. That's scary. So every Pokemon has to be either specially leaning, setup based, or has to have some way to mitigate the idea of the attack drops. So you have to focus on high value targets, you have to focus on taking priority and having a very strong positionality throughout the game. And defensive play is also very linear. The only real defensive Pokemon on the list, for the upper list anyways, is Grimace, which can set up screens, and the Amoonguss, which is just a defensive tank. Lunala is seeing a bit of play as well, but it's not too potent yet. We'll talk about it later. But the power level's just too high on both sides for there to be a whole lot of different defensive options that are relevant. All pairs are leaning for utility on a physical mon and specially powerful. So every single restricted pair on the right side, it is a pairing of a physical Pokemon, and that has some way to mitigate Intimidate, or a special Pokemon as well that can do high-powered burst damage. The only exception to this, really, is, well, there's two. There is the Terapagos Shadow Rider, which is just big damage spread moves, and there is the Koraidon, which has to either use Clear Amulet in order to prevent Intimidate drops, or it has to use Life Dew with close combat and high damaging moves instead of Collision Course, just to outpower the metagame a little bit and have enough stats in order to get those big one-shots that a physical Pokemon needs to get in a metagame like this. Looking at the World Championships, things panned out as expected. It is all Intimidate mitigating Pokemon on top, mostly utility Pokemon on the bottom, but notably, lots of good weather setters, things that set up Sun especially, which is really good for synergizing with the passive Paradox Pokemon activating their photosynthesis. And Lunala and Calyrex are showing really good utility with a lot of these other Pokemon, that Psychic and Ghost pairing. I wonder if anyone was ready for that. Spoiler, they were. Looking at the top Pokemon, Incineroar, Rapid Strike, Rillaboom, Raging Bolt, again taking priority, taking initiative, or dealing with, or just being Intimidate, or dealing with defensive play. Then it's a lot of defensive Pokemon through Amoonguss, Smeargle, and Whimsicott trying to set up strong utility for your team. Lots of sweepers for the other Pokemon, and technically Trick Room has a bit of a showing, but it's not relevant to our storyline as heavily today. For Masters anyways. Let's talk about our finals. We have, this is the best image I could get, sorry. So we have a Ghost Psychic restricted Pokemon that is specially leaning, that does big burst damage for both teams. Then Koraidon with a way to mitigate Intimidate for both teams. Then a Fire-type attacker, but one special, one physical, through Incineroar on one side and Chi-Yu on the other. Chi-Yu, instead of trying to bring down the attack stat from the opponent, instead brings down their defenses so that the high damage can just overwhelm the stat spreads that are so perfectly curated for the World Championships. Then we have Raging Bolt for James Evans, big high burst damage and paired with Sun, good stat boost. You can do some funny things with that. And then on Giovanni's side, Fluttermane, big special damage spread. It gives you an option for if you ever don't want to bring Lunala to have more potent staying power and more burst readily available with high speed. I'm going to skip the Root Bonnet for now, we're talking about that in a second. And both sides have a ground type with high burst damage, either physical through the Ursaluna, with just such high damage that you don't even care about Intimidate, or the especially leaning Life Orb Sheer Force on the Landorus, which is just big damage numbers especially. Very specially leaning for James Evans, a bit of a mixed bag for Giovanni, but interestingly, they both have that Brute Bonnet. Let's look at the teams in a more breakdown focus and talk about why Brute Bonnet is on both of these teams. I have not mentioned Brute Bonnet yet, but it's a dark type. That is important. Sucker Punch, priority dark damage. What are some of the best restricted Pokemon right now? Shadowrex, Calyrider, cool, and Lunala, cool. Two Pokemon that are extremely vulnerable to dark coverage, which Brute Bonnet is able to mitigate. Brute Bonnet is also similar to Amoonguss in its stat spread, defensive, it has Spore, it has Redirection, and most importantly, at the World Championships, every core testing group has defined what EVs and IVs are perfect for their Pokemon. Because of that, you can choose to take those perfect spreads and compare them to rogue picks. Your rogue picks are going to be ready to deal with a metagame that is theoretically figured out, even though it's stayed privatized for a while. And Brute Bonnet has just enough defenses to where It is able to do most of Amungus's roles whilst checking Shadow Rider and Lunala, and also cover all of the same utility that is otherwise covered through the Amoonguss by base. In addition, with the Sun and the Photosynthesis, because you're not able to switch out too much to get good regenerator value when such big damage is coming at you 24/7 anyways, having extra stat points to help you otherwise is just alright anyways. You might notice only James Evans has Intimidate, so he doesn't need to worry about Intimidate, but the only Pokemon that really care about the physical damage being held out a little bit are the Koraidon and sometimes Incineroar. Incineroar has Fake Out Knockoff and 2 utility moves. No Flare Blitz, it can't do that pressing power. And even though every Pokemon has a lot of utility, you have the Volt Switch on Raging Bolt in order to keep your tempo while pivoting. You have Protect on Landorus in order to promote Mind Games. You have Spore and Rage Powder off Bonnet. You have Encore on Shadow Rider, so if you outspeed, you can lock people into setup moves. And you have Flame Charge on Koraidon to be a more potent physical threat. It is overall a very utility-focused team that is trying to wear the opponent down slowly and position itself favorably in order to win games through just brilliant positioning. Then we have Giovanni's team. Same exact Brute Bonnet, except instead of the Covert Cloak, it's Citrus Berry from 1 bulk. Ursaluna is just big damage. Fluttermane has Icy Wind in order to help the tempo of the game since you have no other real tempo setting abilities on your fast side. But you also have Lunala with Trick Room in order to twist to the dimensions. If you get outsped consistently, you can still take the tempo. You have Wide Guard in order to protect against the Shadow Rider and Ice Rider spread moves. You have the Flame Charge again with that Koraidon in order to do big damage and choose your tempo. And Chiyu has Snarl as well in order to lower special attacks, just as some form of utility since your team is very physically bulky, but weak on the special side other than your Fluttermane. And I'm going to be honest, there's other people who can cover this best of 3 way better than I ever could, but what I can say for sure is that Giovanni ended up winning with that Wolfie VGC signature of the Life Orb Koraidon, and really, he is kind of reinforcing some common themes of the game that you want to keep in mind if you're going into VGC competitively. Pokemon's only as good as the meta that surrounds itself by. If you know the metagame, you need to prepare for it properly, and even the bad Pokemon that are subpar in other respects can be made better through the Pokemon you surround them with. When perfecting a meta, base stats are going to be perfect. You need to have utility on your team. You need to be able to deal with perfect base stats and things that people have worked all year to figure out. Every Pokemon should be threatening in some regard and should have some form of damage that you can't ignore, because if it is just a sitting rock after a certain point in the game, it's not going to be able to have enough sticking power long term, and every piece of the puzzle is needed in order to have a balanced team, all things considered. With that, let's move into TCG. Spoilers all over the place, but you guys knew that this was coming. NAIC results: Isaiah Brandner and Riley UK face in Grand Finals. Riley, a local player, a good friend of mine, and a good friend of mine. I know, weird phrasing, you know what I mean. But he qualified for one of his very first finals and one of the biggest tournaments of the year. Remember that name, you'll see him again. Piper Lopine's also lower down on top 8, but you'll see that name again too. Guardian's King. Grimmsnarl, not really potent in the top other than Piper. It's mainly a Gardevoir check, but it seems to have bad matchups into other things, so at the World Championships, when you're not just going to face Guardy, you might want to fluctuate your deck choice to be something that has more balanced matchups. Pult can theoretically beat just about anything except itself and its own variants, so it's always going to be potent, but you can generally prepare for them to get genuinely a little bit unlucky at times. The simpler decks tend to underperform. Raging Bolt was one of the highest picked decks, and it stayed into day 2, but it didn't have that staying power that people expected it to have, and Shaman ended up being pretty underplayed because Terror Box started to get underplayed, no Slow King decks or any real spread decks, therefore Spread and Snipe is good. If a card is bad, and it directly counters your decks, because your decks aren't popular, it indirectly makes your decks a better meta call for a metagame. Therefore, if people are all not running Shaman anymore, even though it exists, and even though it counters your deck, your deck is going to be getting better just out of relativity to the metagame. Again, the deck and the Pokemon are only as good as the metagame around it. Going into deck analysis, Raging Bolt and Grimmsnarl top picked decks in day 1, Gardevoir is up there, Joltik Toolbox, another, not autopilot deck, but another easier deck to play, is up there in pick rate, and then 2 Dragapult decks as well. Going into day 2, Bolt still stays on the top because it's consistent, Marnie's Grimmsnarl shifts down a little bit, and Flareon Noctowl pops into the meta because of Wellspring of Mask Ogerpon being able to do spread damage is pretty good. Dragapult stays, Guardian moves up, and Joltik is off the graphic. Going into top... Do I not talk about top 8 for NAIC? I don't talk about top 8 for NAIC. Okay, we're just gonna look at this right here. 1 Grimmsnarl, 1 Raging Bolt, no Joltik. Good decks aren't doing that well, or easy decks aren't doing all that well, all things considered. Let's talk about White Bolt Black Flare a little bit. The new sets that came out between NAIC and Worlds, a few improvements to the metagame have come from this that affect a couple of popular decks. Genesect ability, search your deck for 2 evolution medals and put them into your hand. Consistency for Goldango, great card. Air Balloon for your retreat for a lot of the Pokemon in the metagame, including Goldango. That is a 2-watch deck, and if you can't beat Goldango, you're gonna have a bad time. And Grimmsnarl and Raging Bolt have a lot of trouble into Goldango, so those are going to be a bit less picked, all things considered. Jellicent, good utility, good damage, prevents items and tools being played. It's something to worry about. Spoiler, we're not going to have to worry about them all that much yet, but it just had some really good showings at the Pittsburgh Regionals this weekend, so keep an eye on Jellicent. And Hilda, search your deck for an evolution and an energy card, reveal them, put in your hand, shuffle your deck. Guess what? That is really good utility to search for a Dragapult and a Neo Upper Energy. Oh, Dragapult's it beats itself problem is solved. That is the big card of the set. People slept on it. Guess what? Let's look at the graphics. Goldango, highest pick rate. It turns out consistency is really good. Dragapult, right up on the graphic. Because, again, turns out consistency is pretty good. And if a deck can't beat itself anymore, pretty good. Raging Bolt Ogerpon, again, it's easy, it's consistent. Of course, it's going to be popular. Guardy, popular. Charizard Pidgeot, a popular deck to answer Gardevoir because of the dark weakness on Gardevoir and beefy stat lines, but it has bad matchup into Raging Bolt, it has an iffy matchup into Goldango, especially without Radiant Charizard, and your Dragon Bolt matchup, if they run the Devo, can be very coin flippy. So it's a deck to watch out for, but it's scary. I flipped these graphics around. So this is the day 1 graphic, and again, like Raging Bolt, pretty popular, Goldango and Dragon Bolt, very popular because, oh my goodness, consistency is good. Gardevoir, still staying power. Marnie's Grimmsnarl, a bit less played, but then again, we've been over the fact that it has some bad matchups into the current metagame, and Flareon Noctowl, again, just good utility overall. Let's talk about Top Cut a little bit. It top cut to top 11, then they cut down to 8, and then they kept playing. Only 1 Guardy, Riley McKay, but keep an eye on him because he's going to be going against what? That first Dragapult, then I don't even remember his line, but we'll talk about it as the tournament goes on. Lots of Zoroark, a shadow pick that just has good matchups into Guardy, good consistency, good matchup into Raging Bolt. Dragapult can't even touch it, really, and even though it has a bit of a shaky time into Goldango, most of the time you can just match them on tempo and then beat them out in late game, unless they run the Joltik as we saw in Seniors Finals. And 2 of those Charizard Pidgeots to deal with Guardy, but they've beat all the Guardies. Now they're here in the top 11. Top 11 cuts to top 8. Sorry about Piper's name being crossed out, but that game happened earlier in the tournament, unfortunately, and Piper did not win that game due to very bad prizing. If Piper did not prize 3 Goldango in a Raging Bolt matchup, it is highly likely that Piper would have genuinely won the entire event, but that is a side note that we can't really get too into. Over here we have Junya Tanaka versus Mateus. The Charizard EX, very strong, able to generally outpace Zoroark. Charizard into Guardy, shaky matchup, we'll talk about it. Polt against Zoroark, favors the Polt generally speaking, just because they can have more board staying power and prevent the Patch Run from coming online. And Raging Bolt into Goldango we've already discussed. Games went as so. Riley beating the Zard, turns out having a very strong board positioning and very strong snipe when your opponent isn't running many ways to deal with it, and just having really solid damage numbers all around. Guardy can tend to take tempo and deal with a field pretty easily. Then it was Riley against Raging Bolt, and Guardy against Raging Bolt when Guardy 4 has the Lily's Clefairy to add weakness to Dragon Pokemon to Psychic. Like, no, that is unfortunately pretty much a borderline impossible matchup unless they hit a bunch of Prime Catchers, and spoiler, you only run one. So it becomes a very hard matchup for Bolt to win, all things considered. So unfortunately, Riley will, well, not unfortunately for the Bolt, Riley will win that. Canadian Top Cut though, we love that. And then when it gets to the other game of Top 8, it ended up being Junia versus Justin, and Zard, big damage, but Bolt makes a field, doesn't take prizes, so Charizard effectively is just a less damage Bolt. Bolt's consistent, it can't really beat itself anymore. Yeah, Justin won that. Our finals is set. It is Riley versus Justin. These two actually tested at the venue earlier on in the year, which is kind of awesome. But yeah, they were testing earlier in the week. They actually both made edits to each other's decks. Riley recommended more Hilda for Justin, and it paid off because he got a consistent run to top 8 and to finals, and Justin recommended a couple of things that Guardy could do to help against Bolt. Oh no, Justin helped Riley figure out the Bolt matchup a little bit. Unfortunately, Riley is running the Lily's Clefairy and a bunch of strong Pokemon that are just able to deal super weakness into one-shot Dragapult. Dragapult can't really keep tempo, Monkey Dories keep all the damage on Dragapult's side of the field. This matchup is doable for Bolt, but incredibly hard. And yeah, Riley ended up winning. A Canadian winner, here's the deck list. We can talk about the deck list really quick. A few notable things to say anyways. All of the Pokemon in the deck have 1 energy retreat cost, which means you can attach an energy to it, and going first, you have 2 Artisan, 2 Nest Ball, 4 Ultra Ball. You can use any of them, get a Flutter Mane, bench a Flutter Mane, discard retreat into the Flutter Mane. Suddenly, if your opponent starts Latios, if your opponent starts Pheasantipity or Mew, if your opponent is starting a Teal'c Gografon or a Fanrotom, no matter what they're starting, that utility that they wanted to bring to the game is shut down, and you have the tempo. You have TM Evolution in order to get out your Kirlias and Gardevoirs quick, Screamtail in order to put good pressure on your opponent's side of the field. Because no one's running Shaman, you get a lot of freedom on where you put those damage counters. For Monkey Dory, again, just Monkey Dory is ridiculous. It takes damage that you do to yourself and moves it to the opponent. Oh wait, Gardevoir does a lot of damage to itself, because Psychic embraces infinite Psychic energy attachments by damaging yourself. Yeah, that's high utility right there, and very high staying power. 2 Rare Candy is interesting, but it means that if you bench triple Ralts, even if the Gardevoirs are dealt with, or if you prize a Guardy, or if you prize a Kirlia, you have a lot of ways to get out your Gardevoir pretty consistently, especially with Secret Box in the list. Mew-EX, copying opponents' attacks sometimes are the best ways to deal with their field. Lily's Clefairy helps with Dragapult, helps with Raging Bolt, Pheasantipity, good draw. And TM Devolution, with 4 Monkey Dories, you are able to put a lot of damage on a lot of Pokemon. With Screamtail, you're able to put target damage on certain Pokemon. You are able to put a lot of damage on a lot of Pokemon. TM Devo is just a great way to clear the field and make sure that your opponent has no way of building momentum in order to make any comebacks. And with that, that is our World Championships recap. If you want to see more, you can reach out to me, Kazapniak, through YouTube, Twitch, the X, through the Discord. Any of the links that you need for the slides or anything of that nature are going to be in the description. And yeah, I hope that you guys all enjoyed our little World Championship recap in collaboration with Brock University. And if you want to see more live sessions like this, or if you want to be a part of one of the live sessions, let me know in the comment section down below if there's anything that I can do of that nature. And I am wishing you guys all the best. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully I'll upload another video sooner than 4 months from now.